And these lessons apply whether you're at that level, you're coaching youth sport, as a parent, with the people you work with. It's the same principle. So these high-performing principles go across the board.
I'm Ian Hawkins, and this is Sport is Life. The purpose of sport as I see it is to see your vision become a reality, find your voice, create strong connections, and learn to trust your body.
The Friday episode of each week of the podcast will be commenting about something relevant in this week of sport. So not me reporting on news, but rather looking at what's going on and then putting a different spin on it based on the things I already talk about. So I've made some observations this week and I want to share them with you. I've also been on holidays this week, so much more relaxed atmosphere here. I'm just sitting here in sunny Port Macquarie, mid-north coast of New South Wales, having a very relaxing time. And interesting week in sport, particularly if you're an NRL fan, with the Brisbane Broncos job coming up, and he was the current New South Wales coach who's now taking on the Broncos. And just listening to the press conference, and some of the journos, as their job to try and get a story and ask tough questions. And Michael McGuire's always been someone who's been known as being fairly hard taskmaster. And his response to a question around that was, first and foremost, his job is to build a connection with his young players so that he's got that relationship. And what he's found is that that's the first thing that he cares about, and it is the first thing that he cares about, is building those relationships with the players in his team. Is that when you build that relationship and they work hard, and then he loves watching them go from there to becoming first graders, to winning a premiership, to representing their state. All of those things, it comes off the back of having a great connection with them. And he said, and so if by me, I've seen the positive impact of that. He's seen the positive impact of operating like that. So if that means people want to call me being hard, then I'll accept that, because he knows the impact of what he does and how he coaches. But mostly it was around connection. And this is a bit of a theme with the best coaches. He said he really likes to get to know his players. He wants to help them succeed. And if that's being hard, then so bad. I love that response. And so I think with the results he's already got with New South Wales this year, and if he has that same approach and the quality they've already got there, well, success is going to follow, because that is a key component of everything, of sport, of business, of family. Connection first. So great response from Madge. Craig Bellamy, I think this is an old interview, but he was being interviewed and they're talking about one of the first things that they do down at the Melbourne Storm when new players and new staff come in, is they send them off to this army training camp. And one of the key things they get out of that is these guys who run the camp get really good at finding out about the person, how they communicate, how they fit into the team framework, and how they will be dealt with in the best possible way to get results. So again, it's all about very much a people focus with these guys. And then he talked about, then he was asked, how do you stay on top, because they've been successful for so many years. And he said, it's all about the players and the staff and the people that we get in. And we get good people here. People who care about the football team, people who care about their teammates. So again, it's very much a people-focused thing. As long as we keep getting in players and staff who care about their teammates and have that mentality, then we'll always be able to play and perform to our capabilities. Notice he's not talking about outcomes. He's not talking about winning premierships. He's talking about people first, caring about themselves, about the team, about their teammates. And then he goes on to say, it's not always enough. So having that mentality is not always enough to win games and to win a premiership. But at least if you're performing to your capabilities with players who care, there's a really good chance you're going to be successful. So he's taken the outcome away from it. Good people playing to their capabilities. And these lessons apply whether you're at that level, you're coaching youth sport, as a parent, with the people you work with. It's the same principle. So these high-performing principles go across the board. And further on to, Craig Bellamy, one of the coaches this week in his team in the grand final. The other coach, Ivan Cleary, and I just happened to pick up a podcast with him. It's also from a few years ago. But it's another thing that I love hearing sports coaches and people at that level talking about things that aren't usually talked about. And you don't hear him talking about this in press conferences. You won't hear it on the news. But in a podcast, they tend to open up about things that they wouldn't otherwise. And he talked about his relationship with his son Nathan, who's clearly one of, if not the best player in the game at the moment. So success is one thing, but he talked about, we talk a lot, but we also don't talk a lot. He said we have a spirit we share, or something, like he couldn't quite describe it. Now, for me, I know that's talking about the connection we have, that unconscious connection, the connection we have through energy. But he gets it, right? He just said we just kind of get each other. He's talked about Nathan. He goes, he's just taken these things in. The things that I've said over the years, and now he's just absorbed it. And he said, I hear him say things that I'm like, oh wow, those things over all of these years have really sunk it in. And he said he felt like it was more. He described it, and these weren't his words, but it sounded almost like an absorption, which is very much in line with a lot of the things that I've learned as well. Then the question from the interviewer follows. I don't want to get too weird, but it's kind of like you have a spiritual connection, talking about Ivan's connection with his son Nathan. I think two things interesting about that is, one, that, like that sense that that's a weird question to ask. Now, every day we talk about team spirit, but then when someone wants to talk about spirituality, then it's weird. And I get why he spoke like that, because it is a bit of a foreign concept, but this is stuff that is just common language when you're doing coaching, when you're talking about the connection that you can have with people. And I love that it's starting to head into that sport area, because it's such a powerful tool. And Ivan goes on to say, I don't want to get too weird either. Connection's an amazing thing. It's like its own little energy source. And he talked about how him and his wife really valued it, that sense of connection. We put a lot of time into it, and how much that all of his 4 children have just absorbed that behaviour because his parents have valued it. The example he also used was a player not in his team, Tom Trbojevic, although he spent a lot of time injured, and I'll get to that in another episode, but he just said he came back from injury. I think this podcast was about 3 years old. Came back from injury, and he was playing unbelievably well, but he said he noticed something. He said not only was he playing well, but suddenly his brother, who's also in that team, started going to a whole other level. And then he said he noticed that other players in the team started playing at a whole other level. And he's like, wow, not only is he a great player, but there's some kind of connection there where he lifts everyone up. And he says, I really believe in that stuff. And again, so great to hear, because I not only believe in it, I've seen it in action. It's one of the key things when I'm coaching is so that player knows just how valuable that is. And sometimes that can be quite confronting to these players, those players who are like the glue, the ones that hold everyone together, because they can almost feel unworthy of it. And I talk to them how you don't have to be on the field to have that influence. And it's the energy, it's the confidence that they instill in people. There's a woman I coached a few years ago in the over 40s women's football. Same principle, and she was that player, and I talked to her about that a lot, and she's starting to warm to realising just how powerful that is. My son's another one like that. He's that kind of glue. I feel similar to what Ivan talked about. He's absorbed a lot of the things that my wife and I have taught him over these years, or not even taught him, but he's just witnessed from us. And I also know that Ivan talked about in the podcast, he talked about Jerome Luai being one of those players too. He's like the glue, he described him. And he's been one of those players that's copped a bit of grief at different times for some of his behaviour and maybe some of his play, but interestingly, not only Ivan calling him the glue, but also saw an article this week about Jerome Luai, how he's really stepped up and gone to another level. And he talked about how this year, well, he'd been using a journal for a while, but he particularly increased his use of that journal this year. And his performance has gone to a whole other level. Coincidence? I don't think so. And he talked about the power of externalising, the power of getting all of these thoughts out of his head. And he wasn't just talking about football, he was talking about family, about all those other things that consumed his thoughts or worried him or gave him joy, but just being able to talk about them through that journaling process, just how powerful that had been for his life, which of course then flows through to his football. Because if you're happy and things are going well and you've got tools in place, then everything else just unfolds, and that's exactly what's happened for him. He's suddenly having a fantastic year, and then he's going to go to a new club next year where he's the central focus of the team. It's not going to guarantee success again, but I get a feeling that they're going to have some great success based on him being that sort of player that is the glue, and also how much work he's putting into himself as a person first and foremost. So we look at all these successful people that I've just quoted today and use some of them as examples. The messages: good people, focusing on connection, showing that you care, focusing on that connection, that spiritual connection. And without going too deep on that, it's that subconscious connection that we have with people, where you would have experienced it, where sometimes you can meet people and it's like you've known them your whole life. You've created an instant connection with them where you feel that connection, and it's like you know so much about them already. And then, of course, the journaling process of recognising just how important it is to externalise. So I'm hoping for a cracking game this weekend in the grand final. It's always, as a neutral, it's always great when it's a good game. Last year's game was off the charts. Obviously not so enjoyable for Broncos fans, but I think most neutrals would have absolutely loved that game, and hoping the same this week. But either way, I know that all of those people that I've mentioned today are going to continue to have success, not because of their football ability, although of course that's going to contribute, not because of their coaching ability, and again, that's going to have a contribution, but because of who they are as people and how much work they put in, not just around the football, but about them, about relationships, around their own life. That is the key to continuing to have success. And you look at both, or all of those guys, but particularly Craig Bellamy and Ivan Cleary, sustained success. And you can put it down to that people first attitude, connection first, bringing the relationship aspect, really powerful. Have a think about what that is like in your life. Have a think about how you can make improvements to you, to your relationships. And then you're going to start to find that your performances will increase in all areas of life as well. I'm actually thinking now about, I coached a young fella who was playing in the A-League at the time, still at Fox Sports, so it'll be about 2016. We worked pretty much all on his stuff away from football, but it had a really powerful impact on his football because he was getting the other things right. His relationship, getting organised with his day-to-day life, his other interests, his business stuff, and getting that in order, and that just flowed through. Seems oversimplified, and in a way it is, but it also requires work. So making sure you're doing the work. And please do make sure, if you haven't already, subscribe, like, follow. If you're on Apple, set it to automatic downloads, so that's going to help me hit higher numbers, be able to get in front of more people, and also get in front of even higher quality guests to share their wisdom, and so you and I can learn together about what other information we can take and add to our personal life game plans as well. Have a great day. I'll speak to you all very soon.
You've taken the time to listen to this whole episode. Now it's time to take action. Commit to one thing you've learned today and make it happen. And to avoid any obstructions, join the Sport is Life movement by clicking on the link in the show notes.